such exciting times we live in, right? iPad, iPhone, excuse me. Sorry, that was my boss. I was responding to his email. Well, to escape from all of this, emails, text messages, and phone calls, last Christmas, my wife and I decided to go down to Death Valley. And I'm going to walk you through the 4 days that I spent in Death Valley. It's about 700 miles southeast from the Bay Area. And we got there the day of Christmas. It took us about 7 hours to get there, and by the time we got there, the sun was almost setting. So this was day 1. We reached Death Valley just before sunset. We started setting up the tent. Are there any experienced speakers here in the club? Experienced campers, I'm sorry, in the club? So you will know one rule of camping. Always the number of stakes that you carry are n-1. The number of stakes you need. Well, so we ran into that issue. But, well, the sun was setting and we did not have a whole lot of time to argue over that. Whose mistake was it? We sat down and put the tent up. That was the end of day 1. Drive to Death Valley and setting up the tent. Day 2 began very early for us. We drove a few miles to this spot called Badwater Basin. Badwater Basin is the lowest point in North America. In fact, it's 292 feet below sea level. Let me remind you, we were here for the sunrise. You don't want to be here when it rains and there are flash floods because you will die. It's 292 feet below sea level. We heard it absolutely correctly. The sunrises from here, Badwater Basin, were absolutely majestic. And we experienced it firsthand that day. The sun rose from behind the hills, and we spent a good 2 hours just watching the sun come up. Our plan was to eat lunch by the campsite. Therefore, we started driving back, and on the way, we stopped by Devil's Golf Course. That was a vast expanse of salt deposition. Now you get the trend, right? We were in Death Valley, we watched Badwater Basin, and now we were in Devil's Golf Course. Well, but we did reach on time for lunch that day at the campsite. And there was so much wind kicking in that I realized inside my tent there was enough mud for me to grow food for the next day. And as I said, this was Christmas, December. The sun sets also very early. Therefore, just as we finished our lunch, we were on our way to go watch the sunset, and we had to drive up Telescopic Peak. Get this, we drove up 12,500 feet above sea level, and below us was Badwater Basin, 292 feet below sea level, and the vast expanse of salt deposition called Devil's Golf Course. What a beautiful sunset that was. We came back to our campsite, and we started preparing dinner. We did realize that the mosquito activity picked up at night, and unfortunately, the mosquito activity increases inversely proportional to the amount of mosquito repellent that you have. And we did manage to sleep that night. The next day too, we had a full agenda. We drove about an hour and a half from campsite to this place called Scotty's Castle. You would wonder why on earth did a person build a castle in the middle of the desert? In a place where the summer temperatures go north of 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, to answer that question, and to know some technological marvels that went behind building this castle, we took the tour of the castle, and it took up the entire day. we drove back that night and got to the to the campsite. And as experienced campers you are, you will also know one more rule about camping. You are exposed to wildlife when you are camping. The funny thing is, the growling sound of an animal increases as the size of the animal decreases. And it did scare us for a little while until we realized how small that animal was. And the day went by, the night went by. The next day, we woke up. This was the day we were going to drive back to the Bay Area. We started putting down the tent, and we learned rule number 3 of the camping trip. It's much more harder to get the tent down on the last day when you wanted to get down than it is on the first day when you're trying to set it up. We stopped by the sand dunes on the way out and drove to the Bay Area. Overall, Death Valley is a national park that I will rate as a must-go-to national park. Do not miss the sunrise from Badwater Basin, the sunset from Telescopic Peak, and of course, do the Scottish Castle. Thank you, Toastmaster.